Hey, is this thing on? No one has tuned in yet because no one knew I was going to do this, including me. I wasn't sure whether I would even attempt this. But, there's so much going on right now. So many negative things have happened. There's things I wanted to comment on, and then I decided I shouldn't comment on. And then I thought maybe I owe it to the world to comment on. And, well, assuming you can even hear this because I'm not seeing any indication from the micro. There we are. There we are. So I think I've decided on that factor. I'm gonna let me make a real quick statement about Charlie Kirk and the state of things right now. I was heartbroken when I learned of Charlie Kirk's death, because. Well, I wish I could explain why, really, because I've known about the guy for a long time and never really followed him or the prove me wrong thing or whatever. Not even sure I approve of the whole prove me wrong thing. But it hit hard because one thing I do know about Charlie Kirk is that he was a Christ follower. And I've seen a lot of negative things posted, things he supposedly said that made him racist or transphobic or whatever. And then I look a little deeper and I see that none of that stuff is really true. And it's all taken out of context, including the quotes about him and the Second Amendment. I'm not going to go into any of that, rehash any of that, because it just doesn't matter. Because if you're not willing to go look that stuff up yourself the way I did, then you've convinced yourself and you're never going to change your mind. So if all that turned you off right away from this, the very first live stream I've ever done on YouTube, at least this way, then I'm sorry to see you go. But if you tuned in and you're still sticking around, I appreciate it. You're probably seeing this well after the fact because I still don't have anybody popping in. And I don't expect to, because one thing that's interesting about this channel, maybe not interesting, frustrating in some ways, but I haven't spent a lot of time trying to grow this channel. Back when I used this channel to host the Wordslinger Podcast, I did want it to grow. And then periodically I would do these things, especially during the pandemic. I did this thing called The Kevin Show, which I think I've defaulted to calling this The Kevin Show, even though I'm not doing the fancy intro and all the other stuff yet. Maybe that will come later. But I don't know. I have felt a need for a while to do something here and to make it a part of the rest of what I do. If you don't know what that is, and if you don't know who I am, so my name is Kevin Tomlinson. I'm a writer. I write under the pen name J. Kevin Tomlinson. Did not always write under that. Sort of started off writing under that name, then changed it to just Kevin Tomlinson, and then changed it back to J. At one point, I was J.K. Tomlinson. I was trying to cash in on that J.K. Rowling fame for a little while. That was early days. That was when I was writing some fantasy stuff, and I have written fantasy, but I started off writing science fiction, and most of my work, though, since about 2016, has been thriller novels, and a lot of that has mostly been archaeological thrillers. And now I'm kind of pivoting to something a little different, where I'm probably still going to write the same kind of stuff, but I want to expand and write a little more. I have largely been independent published, indie published, as they say, self-published, if you want to dig into it a little further. But that's most of my work has fallen under that. I've had some traditionally published stuff. I've had contracts in the past, and now I'm at a pivot point for my career. I'm actively doing this thing where I'm writing something that's falling under the traditional publishing aura. A couple of things, really. One with J.D. Barker, and I just got a bunch of edits back from that. And, we could talk about that. We could probably talk about that process. It's interesting to pivot from self-publishing to traditional publishing. And I'm not abandoning self-publishing at all. I'm working on a novel right now that I'll be publishing from my Kotler series, my Dan Kotler archaeological thrillers. And I don't know, I'm going to start doing some more standalone books as an indie author as well. So we'll see how that goes. And stuff like that may be the kind of thing I talk about on this channel. Here's what I need. I need you to help me figure this out. Because I have thought about this for years, and I've tried various things here and there, and nothing really stuck. And one of the big problems for me is that I love talking to a microphone and a camera. My big joke that I love to tell, if you followed me elsewhere, you've heard me say a million times, but the most dangerous space in the world is this little gap between me and this microphone. I love talking to people, engaging with people. And I do that a lot on the author side. I talk to a lot of authors. I do some podcasts that are primarily aimed at the self-publishing world, although one of them was never really intended to be. But I am a co-host on the Writers Inc. podcast. I've been the host of dozens of other writing-related podcasts, including Draft to Digital's Self-Publishing Insiders. I founded that show and launched that show along with the team. I didn't do that on my own. That was a team effort. And I was the primary host of that for 7 years. Well, I say 7 years. We didn't start doing that until 2020. And I have also hosted the Wordslinger Podcast, which is a whole channel of its own now on YouTube. And has been around now. I just celebrated the 12th year of that show. And even though it hasn't traditionally been a self-publishing show, it has leaned that way because I've interviewed a lot of authors. I've also interviewed people from various other parts of different industries. I always meant for that show to be kind of a open format, talking about the things that interest me and talking to the people that interest me. And that hasn't really changed, but that's primarily been self-publishing for years. So I don't want this to be another one of those. I don't want another Wordslinger podcast. I want this to be, I don't know, I'm calling it the Kevin Show, so maybe that's the point. But I'm trying to, I don't know. That's why I need your help. So there's a lot of things that I love, that I'm interested in, and I want to talk to people about those things. One of those is lost history, for example. One of those is, strange and weird science, advances in physics, and things along that lines. I love talking about the intersection between those two things. That's sort of primarily the kind of thing I write about. So I love talking about that. I have a Substack that I update every week, and you're welcome to pop in and follow me there. But that's primarily what I write about, is the sort of things that I come across in my research for my novels. So I may talk about lost history. I may talk about science. I may talk about mysticism and mythology. And comparative mythology is one of those things I talk about quite a bit. I write about that too. As I'm pivoting in my career and I'm going to start writing things a little bit outside of the archaeological thriller genre a little more. I'm sure that the topics will expand. I'm kind of looking forward to that, really. So I can talk about all that stuff. I can talk about the ongoing work. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. Do I want that to be the sort of through line of the show, of this channel? I guess I wouldn't mind, but I'm really kind of interested to hear what you think. What are the things you're interested in? Like, why would you tune in to watch me, ramble at the camera for 30 minutes or so? What I don't want to do, and I've thought about this too, I don't want to talk about things like politics or whatever. And I'm sure some of that's going to bleed in. I'm open to this whole thing, talking about Charlie Kirk, and my feelings about that. I'm mostly just heartbroken because I don't know. Whatever you may think of the guy, it really struck a chord with me that, here was he was a man, a father, a husband. You know, he leaves behind a young daughter, a 3-year-old daughter, and a 1-year-old son, and his beautiful wife, and it just really hit home with me. I mean, I'm 20 years older than Charlie Kirk. I don't have any of those things. I don't have kids. I have a beautiful wife. I mean, we both got lucky on that score, and she's wonderful. It just hit home. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. I started to do it on the Wordslinger podcast, but it happened like the day before I record, and I was still dealing with it. So I'm really not diving into it the way I probably thought I would. But anyway, what I'm really here for is I'm trying to figure out what's a topic that I can come back to regularly. And maybe you can help me with some advice on, how to build a show like this. Like, what is it that makes this work? I've seen lots of things. There's no end of people who would talk about, what makes a YouTube channel work. Consistent posting, that's one. A lot of times they recommend posting multiple times per week. I can try to do that. The trouble for me is depending on how much work goes into it, like if this is something I got to edit every time I record, if I got to do a bunch of fancy edits and drop in footage and drop in graphics and things like that, well, frankly, it's probably not going to happen. I'll end up just abandoning it. I've done that in the past because I have the skill to do all that. What I don't have is the time, because the thing that is the focus of my life and career is my writing. And if anything distracts me from that or detracts from that, it's got to go. So there can't be any of that. So it's probably going to be a lot of this. Well, is this entertaining enough for anybody? Does anybody care if I'm yammering at the camera for half an hour? I guess depending on the topics, right? And who's to say later, I think maybe things could get a little fancier. I could record these and have someone do an edit. This one's live. Half hoped that of the couple hundred people who follow me, that someone will pop up, ask a question, make a comment, and then I can comment on that. Maybe that'll happen later. Or maybe I'm going to spend several months 2 or 3 times a week talking to the camera, and I'm here by myself. Who knows? And maybe you'll pop in after the fact and offer me some advice. But I don't know. I think we got enough polished, phony stuff out there too. So maybe it would be refreshing for someone to come on and just try to be real for half an hour, 2 or 3 times a week. I don't know. But you could help me. Well, let's talk a little bit about, lost history and weird science. I recently wrote about the God particle. Maybe I should pull that up so I can reference it. But I wrote a whole post about, the concept of the God particle and how it's actually been recurring through history. We've actually seen that theme show up over and over again. And what I mean by that is the God particle. If you're not familiar with it, if you've heard of the Large Hadron Collider, there's something that we call the Higgs boson, and it was a theoretical particle. And you'll have to forgive me because live on air, I'm trying to find my Substack post. Substack does not make it easy for you to simply click through to your own Substack. So give me a second. I'll get back to the interesting stuff in a second. All right. So the post is called The God Particle and the Myths That Saw It Coming. Why the Higgs boson feels familiar to every culture's creation story. It's not exactly a deep dive, but I don't want to, beleaguer the point or anything or dig too deeply and throw people off. But the concept was we've actually Okay, let me get back to what the particle is. The Higgs boson was this theorized particle that when we used the Large Hadron Collider and we smashed two particles together, for a brief instant, we'd be able to see the Higgs boson, which is the theorized core particle that creates mass, makes things what they are in the universe. The underlying everything else, underlying every other particle, is this ephemeral wisp of a particle that gives everything its structure, that gives everything the command to be, basically. And we did that in 2012. We did that, and then, I can talk about some of the theories about what happened as a consequence of that. I have some. I actually think, I have this theory that the Mandela effect is a result of the Higgs boson. I also think that it's not a coincidence that it happened in 2012, which aligns with what was supposed to be the Aztec calendar's end of time, which turns out there's about a 30-year give or take on that. So maybe we're still in range for the whole universe to collapse in on itself. But anyway, that's fun stuff to talk about. If you want to talk about that, I absolutely will. But beyond that, I'm also I look a little bit at like how the concept of something like a God particle has appeared in various cultures and various myths throughout time. We've always had something like that. We've always thought there was this, there was the ether or aether in like Greek mythology. I'm talking off the cuff here. This stuff was not in the article, but there have always been these little subtle things that that we suspected might exist. We keep doing that. We keep discovering that there are concepts and ideas in mythology and in mysticism that we think are just myth, and then they turn out to be verifiable science. And one of those would be in mysticism what's called the Akashic record. In quantum physics, there's this idea of a unified field that serves the exact same purpose as the Akashic record. The Akashic record is supposed to be a sort of it's a record of everything that has happened, everything that is currently happening, everything that ever will happen. All knowledge, all action, all life is all part of this field. And those who were sensitive to the Akashic record could tune into that and do things like see the future, or even see the past, or it's tied in with certain mysticisms, or alchemy and things like that. So all that stuff has been around forever. And then we went and proved that there is now we have a theory. I don't know that we've proven this, or maybe that makes it a hypothesis. We're in the technical weeds on these things, but in quantum physics, there's the same concept, that there is a field out there, and that we are a part of that field. We just have manifested as a sort of physical beings, physical self, because of the Higgs boson. So we brought it all back around. So isn't that fascinating? To me, that's just fascinating. And then you think about when we start getting into science, it's bizarre to me that the further we look out into the universe, the older we discover the universe is. We used to think that we've actually held on to this as fact for decades, that the universe was only about 14 billion years old. And then the Webb telescope came online, and we looked out into the universe, and where we thought we would see sort of the outer edge of creation, we saw more galaxies. and it startled everybody because it literally means that the universe is far older than 14 billion years. So we are we don't know why that is. All our calculations about universal expansion, Big Bang theory, all that stuff, it all told us, it gave us a number, and then that number turned out to be wrong. Not the first time that's happened to us, obviously. Stuff just keeps getting older, as Graham Hancock would say. And speaking about that, if you look at Göbekli Tepe, which I've written about quite a bit, it's around 14,000 years old. Well, that puts it in the range of we were supposed to be just a Stone Age species, hunting and gathering, stone tools at best. We weren't supposed to have fully built cities, languages, artwork. All that stuff wasn't supposed to exist yet, but it does. Now, I think I'm seeing evidence that there is a huge cover up in that. And if you don't know about Göbekli Tepe, it's in Turkey, modern day Turkey, or they've corrected us now on how it should be pronounced, but I'm just going to keep calling it Turkey. You probably will too. But there's some evidence that they are intentionally trying to cover all that up, destroy some of it. They're building concrete roads over some of it now to turn it into kind of a tourist destination. But at the same time, they're building over sites that haven't yet been uncovered, or that were uncovered and recovered. Fun fact about these dig sites: the reason that they will rebury a site is because that's the safest way to preserve an archaeological site. It survived under soil for all those thousands of years. The more it's exposed to light and air on the surface, the quicker its deterioration will happen. And you can see this with like the heads on Easter Island. A lot of those were buried, completely buried. Some only exposed like maybe parts of the heads or whatever. But we've been excavating around some of those, discovered that they go much deeper, and they have bodies, which is just bizarre to think. But they have buried bodies, and you can see the deterioration line between the stuff that was buried and the stuff that's now exposed to the air. You can actually see the literal deterioration of those statues. Same thing with sites we've uncovered in like Mayan temples and Aztec temples in the Americas. We find them, we uncover them, we learn from them, but it's observation has an impact. It can be a destructive act. And so that's what we're seeing happening a lot with those sites. So all this just kind of gels together, right? It's all kind of, it's very interesting to me. I love ancient history. I love history of all kinds, really. But I mean, I particularly love this sort of out of place ancient history stuff, the quirks and mysteries of the historical landscape. I love science, especially the stuff that gets off into the realm of things that we can't quite explain. Does anyone else ever look up and think about, like when I see the photos that come back from Mars, does anyone else ever think about like the concept of one day standing on the surface of Mars and literally being further from home than any human being has ever been? And what that means. Because here on Earth, there are places on Earth where you can be so isolated that you have no hope of survival. I mean, if someone were to drop you off in the middle of the Serengeti somewhere, your chances of survival, let's just cut, wild animals out of the equation. Your chances of survival, just getting back to civilization, are so slim. There's no one to help you. It doesn't have to be the Sahara. Right here in the United States, we have deserts. Like Death Valley. You could find yourself in dire straits if you ended up even simply just pulling off of the highway, you get a flat or your radiator goes and you're out in the middle of the desert on a highway, you're still too far away from people to reasonably expect help unless it just happens by. So if you don't have cell phone coverage, if you don't have water, if you don't have the means of survival, I mean you're toast, and you could actually die from isolation with a traffic sign directly in front of you. That's on Earth. Now think about being thousands and thousands of miles away on a planet where when the Earth is even visible, it's just a pale blue dot in the distance. Like you might overlook it thinking it was just one of the stars. Never mind the fact that everything about Mars is going to kill you if you, the light atmosphere with no oxygen, the lack of water, radiation, all these things are stacked against you as it is, and so the chances are if you're stranded on Mars, you're going to die, unless you're Matt Damon. But just being there and looking back and just knowing that this massive planet that we're on, with all the buildings and all the cars and people going about their business, and jungles and great pyramids and the Great Wall of China and all these things that when we consider our place next to them make us feel petty and small. Consider all of that. You can hide all of that behind your thumb if you hold it up to the sky. Man, does anyone else think about that and just blow their own mind? I do it all the time. And then the thought of, out there in the universe somewhere is a planet. Just the odds are it would have to be where there is atmosphere and there is, plant life and water, and no human being is likely to ever set foot on it. I mean, in a million lifetimes, we may never ever find it. We may never ever even just guess that it's there. Just blows my mind. That stuff blows my mind. I'd love to talk about that stuff. Maybe I will. Maybe from here on out, that's what I do. So anyway, I wanted to do this first one. I knew no one would be able to tune in live because I didn't advertise it. I still haven't advertised it to anyone. If you stumbled across this after the fact, let me know what you think of it and what you're interested in. And maybe it's just a conversation then. If people start tuning in and asking questions, I mean, maybe that's what it is. Let me do this. I could have done this. Let's see. It lets me share my screen. So let me share. Yeah, this article I was telling you about. So maybe this is, I'm such a newbie in all this that I don't even know what can and can't be done. So yeah, this is the post on Substack, the God particle and the myths that saw it coming. If you're interested in this kind of thing as a topic, you're definitely going to want to follow me on Substack. So go over there, kevintumlinson.substack.com. You can go to kevintumlinson.com and find my books and find other things, including a link to the Substack, and I think possibly a link to my YouTube channel. If not, I'll eventually put one there. I'm supposed to say like, share, subscribe, all those things, and I do. I say them. But yeah, pop on over and take a look at this post. Nice comments from it. There's also a little note here. This was where I shared my initial thoughts about Charlie Kirk and his murder. But yeah, go do that. If you like this topic, if this is the kind of thing you want to hear about and discuss, actually, here's what I think I'm going to do. I think I'm going to commit to that. I'm going to commit to talking about the sorts of things that interest me because they're what I'm writing about, what I might write about, and then hopefully people will start tuning in and asking questions or making comments and contributing, and we'll just build this together. How's that sound? I love it. And then that's it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. I appreciate you being a part of this, and when you are. Right now, I think there's 2 people watching, and I may be one of them. But I'm glad to have you here. And well, God bless you, and I'll see you next time.